Now that we have the pseudocode written, I'm ready to go ahead and either flowchart this thing or get it into Python. So Raptor is part of this curriculum or part of this course because it does introduce you to the notion of flowcharting. So let's go ahead and just go straight into the flowcharting. One of the advantages of Raptor is that once we create a flowchart, we'll actually be able to execute the flowchart as though it was a real program. So let's go ahead and do that. I went ahead and included I pinned Raptor down here so that I'd just be able to flat out launch the thing, okay? And when I click on it, we end up with the area in which we can build our flowchart, and then down here in the master console, we have an area in which we will get our output, okay? So I'm looking at my pseudocode, and I'll just move that, say, right here, so it's kind of easier to read, all right? If I click here, what's it going to happen? I see that's going to go away. All right, so just remind ourselves, we want to get an input length and input width. We want to run some calculations, and then we want to output it. All right, so let me move the pseudocode out of the way. If I want to get input into Raptor, I simply have a look over here and see if there's anything there that would clue me into the fact that Raptor is trying to obtain input. And sure enough, there's the word input. So if I click here, now when I click here on that little tiny line, it will create an input event, if you will. All right. I can, and this is the flowchart symbol for input, but you'll notice that it doesn't give us any opportunity for creating a prompt or doing a variable. Well, what we need to do is actually to make this happen is to double click this, and we can enter our prompt, which needs to be done in quotes or it'll never work. So I go ahead and right away and do two double quotes next to each other. That way I don't forget the trailing quote whenever I'm coding prompts. All right, so I'll go enter, E-N-T-E-R, enter the length of the rectangle. Put in a colon and a space. Of course, we're prompting it, but now we need to get whatever data the user types into a variable. So I'm going to type in the letter L right down here, and you can see that that's pretty hard to read. Some folks will choose to do an uppercase L to make it more readable. I discourage that because most variables are lowercase or what is known as camel case, which we will discuss later. Okay, so we're going to pick done. And since this is still highlighted in red, I can come right back over here and I can click again and double click. Enter the next prompt, enter. I did the length, so the width. Put in my close quote and type in the letter W. Now, in terms of a good user experience, I don't remember how I handled the uppercase letters and lowercase letters in my previous input, so I'm going to go back and revisit that just to make sure it's right. And the way that I do that is I just click and double click. And I see that length is a lowercase L there, so I'll use an uppercase L. And I see that it went into the space. Try that out. There we go. I am happy with that. Now it's asking me to save my work, okay? That's what Raptor is going to do. If you've made a few changes and you haven't saved your work just yet, it's going to eventually ask you to save it. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Now, do you remember when we were tinkering around and we created our neat little subdirectories? Well, let's go ahead and head on over to where we want to save our work, our directories. Off of the main C drive, double click here. This is an example, so I'm going to double click here and I'm going to give it its correct name, and that's going to be Broderson _ example. Okay? Now some people really want to put the chapter and the problem number in their file name. They're welcome to do that. If they wanted to, if this example came from, say, chapter 6, problem number 3, you could actually say chapter 6, problem 3. You could do that. That doesn't bother me, okay, as long as it's in the correct folder. So I am going to, however, just say example, like so, and I'm going to save it. So now I've created a file that hopefully is in that directory, and let's go over and take a quick peek and make sure it really is, okay? because it wouldn't be the first time I put something where it doesn't belong. Local disk C, come down in here. I see there's no files in there, which is excellent. Click in there, and sure enough, it worked. So I'm real happy about that. I've got my input. Now I can get back to my program, right? It's time to do some processing. Well, what we want to do is we want to assign our calculations to a variable. So I'm going to come over here to where it says assignment, right there, okay? And I'll click on this little arrow right down here like so, double click, and I can say set A, which is the area, to length, space, times width, okay? And I'm pretty happy about that. So I'm going to pick done, and then right underneath there, I'm going to click again, double click, and I'm going to say set P, which is the perimeter, to, watch what happens if I go 2 times, open parenthesis, L times W, close parenthesis. As you can see, that is really hard to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some spaces here to clean it up. Put a space between L and the parentheses, so now L is much easier to read, and W is much easier to read. This is the reason that we introduce spaces in our equations. So now that I've done that, we pick done. And I think the only thing that's left is to get some output. So we did an input, and sure enough, there's an output one. So we'll come over here and click, double click, and we're going to send a message along with the output. We need to make sure that the user knows what we're talking about when we have the computer print any kind of numbers or any kind of data onto the screen for the user to read. So let's go ahead and include that, all right? We'll say that the area is, and do a close quote, and we need to get the contents of A into this output. And the way that that's done is we use the plus symbol. The plus symbol is used to add things together, but whenever we're dealing with a string of characters like this, the plus symbol means to append to the string of characters whatever the contents of the variable is in many programming languages. Sometimes you have to take additional steps, but for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate, because that's what that really is, concatenate the contents of A onto this little sentence that says the area is. Well, I want to get the perimeter in there too, so I'll go plus, and I'll do a space, I'll go quote, and do a space, and, because remember, whatever number I have here, I need to make sure there's a space after it, so I stuck a space here, and the perimeter, is that how you spell it? The perimeter is close quote, and again we do our handy dandy concatenation, our variable P, and that should do it for us, okay? So I'm going to pick done, just like so. And it looks like I have my flowchart, and as you can see, it's just basically a top-down critter. It starts at the beginning and it just goes straight on down. There's no branching or anything like that. So we'll hit this button right here, and what it's going to do is it's going to take this flowchart and it's going to execute it. And it's going to do it nice and slowly, okay, so that we can see things in operation. So click on that, start, and as you see, it immediately stopped here. It's expecting input. It wants to know what the length is, so I'll say 6. I'm going to pick OK to that, and now it's asking for the width, and sure enough, enter the width of the triangle. And here I'll just say 2. I'm going to say OK to that. And now you can see that it did some calculations. All right. And of course, as it did the calculations, it made these squares green until finally it outputted things somewhere. Where did it go? Oh, yeah, over here. So it says that the area is 12 and the perimeter is 24. So it looks like our little example works really, really good. And now that I'm done with that, I can close this. I can close this because I'm done with Raptor, save the changes, and I'm ready to move on to the Python portion.